So the Capital Improvements Advisory Board is waiting to begin session with the
Oh,
comprehensive.
Steve's on.
Is he in?
Just says connecting to audio, but he's here.
We're waiting for a quorum and
So Steve, if you're there and can unmute and start your video, that'd be cool. Actually, I know that mute him.
How's that?
We can hear you. Give it a little camera icon you can tap so we can see you.
It doesn't seem to want to come off. Oh, wait, there it is. You. I'm clicking the start video and nothing's happening.
can
Okay.
you see anything?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Are you able to see us?
Yeah, I can see you. But the start video has a red line through it, and I don't seem to be able to take it off.
Okay. Hold on.
It's just
Somehow,
on.
do you have a system, a default on there or something?
If it says he's able to actually see this exciting. The consultant's not on that either.
It's supposed to be on at 5.
That's a good question. Dave, do you know when the consultant was planning to get on?
Supposed to be on at 5. Let me make sure she was in fact invited with the correct address. Yeah, she should be.
Browse address bar.
Because that would also defeat the purpose. Well, while we are waiting for the consultant to be contacted, just sort of an update on where things stand. I had a conversation with Joe Cahill and Dave the other day about how to proceed. The mayor has reiterated his interest in having us put together a set of revisions, recommended revisions to the enabling ordinance, but most importantly, I think, to how the city does its capital improvement plan. He recognizes that this laundry list is huge, and there's probably another set of things that we hadn't even anticipated, which will show up. Jill said that she'd like to see us try to put something together concrete early, middle of next year. Earlier the better. I'd like to get it incorporated into the comprehensive plan, so it actually is memorialized as a goal. And I'd like to encourage the administration to set aside money in the FY25 budget. I guess that's where we would be headed.
That'll start July 1.
Yeah, both as a down payment towards the IT piece of it, asset management program, and towards a coordinator, preferably a senior level person who can tackle all this. She did agree that we had not been getting communications, so most recently there was the frustration voiced by Joe McKechnie that, hey, you're gonna use, you know, city debt for the Rust Island extension. or water improvement system, so they can do year-round water supply. Where did that come from? That's part of the geo debt that capital should be paid out of, and it's obviously a much more complicated thing, but annoyed him, much like I was annoyed when the police station went through as a change, a loan order, and suddenly it's like, oh, you reached agreement on what the scope of the project was. We didn't have the courtesy of even a heads up. So there's a recognition the communication has been miserable and that we are not baked into any process. And so the recommendations we would forward to the administration would not just be about communication, but about the scope of what we review, what kind of threshold projects should be under our purview, and then how the city itself should organize the collection of information, be able to assess it, prioritize it. I shared with Jill a Newburyport capital planning document that's done every year. It's 5 years. It shows funding sources. It shows how they arrived at those decisions. It shows the universe of projects that were under consideration. Pretty impressive.
And is reevaluated yearly?
Yes. And, you know, it's worth taking a look at. I think I sent out the link before, but I think we can learn something from what a good system, a good outcome could be, if we have the will to move forward on it. And that seems to be part of the problem. There's
Excuse
a
me,
lot-
Paul?
Yeah,
Yeah, I just want to ask, there's a little subcommittee of 3 of us. And as I had understood it, I think it was in August or September, there would be some meetings set up with some towns but the subcommittee has stalled, as well. And, I have to be frank, I mean, it's kind of hard to feel energetic, about this. This is exactly what other, a decade ago, what experience, and every, people in this room can account to that, so speak to it. But is there really commitment? I mean, they can say it, but how do we know? Because I'm not sure. I have to say that there's a future here for this. I mean, I understand capital planning, but I'm not sure the citizen participation in capital planning is going to come to fruition.
So-
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Steve. Dave, you may be able to respond to the.
Yeah, yeah,
We're going to
So-
communities.
yeah. You can hear me still?
Yeah.
So I did reach out, I think, as I mentioned, to those 3 communities to try to set up meetings. It was very promising. It turns out one of them, where I formerly used to work, actually, it was promising. They now, as I mentioned to Paul, I think this was around October timeframe, are in, I don't want to say a capital collapse, but a financial calamity of their own. So it was, as much as it was like, yeah, David, that sounds wonderful. We'd love to help you. But the fact is we have our own municipality to deal with and its own funding. So that kind of fell through. Very promising. That was not on the list was Beverly. I did reach out. We set up a time for us to go over there, or at least me to go over there to explain what we wanted to do. And then more or less, unfortunately, they ghosted me. So I can continue those efforts. We reached out to Newburyport as well. Some interest, but more or less like we're kind of doing our own thing.
Maybe the subcommittee has to identify whether this is important enough, or we can do a workaround and continue some effort without necessarily having these, or participate when they come available.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to talk to the 3, or well, now the 2 of you about was, I'm trying to set up these meetings. It's been touch and go at best. So I didn't know, do we still need to do this? Is this something anyone's interested in, to go visit these other communities?
I think, at least from where I'm sitting, we know enough about what a model system would look like, both from the Division of Local Services presented. We know what the components of capital improvement planning are. We can, with some discussion, identify how, a template could be tailored to meet the city's needs. And so I think it'd be helpful, Steve, and agree that we're on that course, but I don't think it's at this point necessary. if we want to just hunker down and spend some time walking through the outline of what process should look like, and where we would need to get either the ordinance changed or policies and procedures developed that could implement a sustainable, accountable, reliable system. Because I do think everyone recognizes what we have now is ad hoc. It's emergency driven. It does not lend itself to how do you continue this when somebody leaves their job and all you have is a bunch of Post-its? So to define what the financing or planning should look like. So I think, Steve, I think would be well served by just saying, okay, if that comes together later, all the power to us for going out to Newburyport and Beverly. But right now, let's just get something down on paper that we can.
Okay,
lay
thank you,
claim
Paul.
to.
Thanks.
So Paul, we have been joined by our consultant.
Hi, we're kind of here on the waterfront in Gloucester. You've visited, so you know we're seated at the harbor master's office, and outside is the lobster pot tree. So if you want to take a tour afterwards, we can sing carols together, or we can just get on with this meeting.
Carols sound lovely. And I'm sorry I'm late. I had written down 5:30 and I just saw David's email. So I apologize if you were waiting for me.
We were working through our own technological challenges, so it's all good.
Okay, good.
So there are 4 members of the committee here plus David. I should say of the board. It's a 7-member board. The board's charged by ordinance with reviewing the city capital plan. It's supposed to be a 5-year plan and making recommendations to the mayor, who would then incorporate that into something that gets submitted to the council. In effect, the ordinance hasn't been followed in 15 to 20 years. There've been periodic attempts to ensure that it actually played a role with citizen oversight of the capital plan. But repeated administrations have ignored the ordinance for a whole host of reasons, and it's not about the finger pointing at this point. The mayor has asked us to come back with how do we update this to make it meaningful so that there's actually reliable input from this board. So one of the things that we'll be focusing on come next month is what those recommendations look like. How do we want to frame them? What's the scope of them? We've done a lot of homework on this. At a subcommittee level, we'll bring the whole board into it. And I think we can benefit probably from your insight, if you have any from other cities, municipalities you've worked with. But that's not for tonight. Tonight is to sort of get a feel for where the comprehensive planning initiative is going. Your role, our roles, how we can be helpful, and then I think some suggestions for how we think we need to be both comprehensive in our approach and not just putting together a wish list of items. So we know what the wish list of capital needs is. We need to figure out how to get there, and that needs to be part of the plan, the how. How do we do this? So, Dave, I would defer to you and Jen.
Sure. I mean, Jen, if you want, I've done it a couple times even today, but if you want to give them an overview of where we are in the process and then sort of explain, this phase 2 part of it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And is it okay if I share my screen? Can you enable that?
Yes.
One of our members is online by just voice, so he will not see.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll make sure to describe verbally anything
Thank you.
I'm hearing you as well. Yeah, that's great.
I think it's.
While we're getting that set up, I just want to say that I'm glad you brought me in to talk with you. It's an important time when you're really thinking about, how to make this wish list into an actionable list with priorities. And I think the comp plan is is actually ideal place to start getting the broader community. I'm not sure to what extent the broader community is aware of the wish list or has any idea of the needs in the community around capital improvements. But I think the comp plan is a great really time and mechanism, if you will, to bring people more up to date. Although the comp plan is of course comprehensive, so we're not just looking at public facilities, it's certainly a big part of it. And
So you're locked out of share right now, it just says host has disabled.
yeah, I'm still locked out. I'm happy just to talk through it. I was just hoping to show you a couple things, but
Is the slides that you presented to the planning board?
one of them, I was going to show you that, and then I was going to show you the meeting in a box. One in particular, activity 4. If you already have that, then maybe I don't need to show it to you. But why don't I just plan to talk through it, and yeah, don't worry about the screen share. So how many of you were some of you actually at the planning board or saw the presentation already?
I've seen it.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it, so I think 3 or 4 of us are not familiar with it.
Okay, so
Open that
so-
chunk, remember?
right, and so my colleague Alana just went to the planning board recently, I think it was last week, to give an update. So you may have seen that one or an earlier version, but we've talked about where we are in the process and the tools. So we're in the second phase where we're trying to get the community to really vision about what they want to see for the future, talking about priorities, but talking more about an aspirational vision, and things that could come out of that visioning are like, we want stellar public facilities and services, and we want to know that our infrastructure will serve us well. It's very, very high level. It's not going to say, the sewer system is the main priority here. It's really going to be more just more general than that. The phase where we start to get into, well, if you want to have stellar public facilities and services and resilient infrastructure, then here's what we know your needs are. And in phase 3, we start to say, well, let's talk about priorities. And we're not going to write the capital improvement plan for you, but I think that phase 3 in particular can start to indicate, typically what comes out on the top of the list is public utilities and public safety and schools. And then you kind of go down from there, but it also depends on what the conditions are. And I know you've been doing some work around trying to understand that. So those kind of details will happen more in phase 3, but what will happen in phase 2 is we're really laying the groundwork for the phase 3 piece to happen. So in phase 2, we have several tools that are live right now, and they're actually live for almost another month till January 12th. And there's been, I'm sure you've heard the buzz, lots of meeting in a box is going on, tabling events. There's a community survey that's been live for, I think, going on 2 months now. And the meeting in a box, I think, is something in particular that I would encourage you as a committee and as members of the community as well, but members of this committee to use to your advantage. In what I mean by advantage is not that you're trying to sway things, but that it's a way to get people talking about the issues that you feel they should be talking about. So what I would recommend, if you're open to it, and I'll talk a little bit about the meeting in a box, but I want to tell you first why I'm zooming in on that piece of it out of all the other tools that I just mentioned. The meeting in a box allows you to invite people to a small meeting that you hold. I mean, it could be a large meeting, but what we're recommending are small meetings throughout the community. You can invite various stakeholders. You can invite other community members. You can invite folks that you feel could be helpful to be in the know about your wish list. And I know you're still working on refining that. But I think at whatever stage it is now, sharing your information now through the meeting in a box could be really helpful. And the meeting in a box is set up that it has several activities, and it's designed so that, I'm just actually pulling it up right in front of me now. It's designed so that you can either do all the activities with your group, or you can focus in on 1 or 2 that you feel are particularly relevant to the group you've gathered or to your interests in getting more community feedback on needs and priorities. And so the activity in the meeting in a box that I suggest you focus on is activity 4, which is called Operations and Transportation. And I realize you don't focus on transportation, but we look at that all as public facilities, services, and infrastructure. And so the questions that you would have your groups answer are, it says the following questions offered to guide your conversation, and you may choose to answer some or all of them. So if you'd like to kind of tag the ones that are most particular to your committee, that would be expected. And then you just basically take notes and submit them, and we include them in an aggregated summary so that some of those issues can start to come out early on in this phase. So some of the questions are, imagine the ideal future for Gloucester's city buildings and operations and public services and transportation options. What would you like to change? What would you like to stay the same? What do public buildings and properties look like? Who has access to public spaces? What does day-to-day running of the city and public schools look like? Then we get into some transportation. What types of transportation options exist, and how is car travel, biking, walking, and transit made easier, safer, or more accessible? So like I said, you can pick and choose the questions that you focus on. But the idea that I'm proposing to you, if you're willing to take this kind of leadership position, is to have I think you said there are 7 members of the committee, have you each run at least one meeting in a box focused on public facilities and capital needs, and really start to have this discussion. The more of that you can do over the next several weeks to a month, I think it can actually feed into the vision. And then next phase, which, well, actually, there's 2 things I want to talk about. Later on in phase 2, after we finish this first round of engagement, we'll tally up everything we heard and create an aggregated engagement summary. That's it has all the transcripts, but then it also has a summary of main things that we're hearing. And then we run a visioning session with the community, which I also encourage you all to attend. We do have the date, and I'm just trying to scroll down to a different slide here so I can get the date. Okay, so we're going to have a live or an activity online before the visioning working session. So folks who want to do some pre-work online, they can start to work with the summary of engagement. It will be live between February 14th and March 2nd for any community members. And I would encourage you all to do this as well, where you can go online and start to do some pre-drafting activity around, all right, I see what we're hearing and I know some of the issues myself. And so I'm going to start to put in some hopes for what's in the vision. And then on March 9th, we're actually running a working session, open community in-person working session on March 9th in City Hall that will be writing that vision. And so I would encourage you all to attend that as well and integrate those needs. And so you can see that what we've created is a feedback loop. We have lots of different chances to kind of raise the various topics and inform people as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think we appreciate what infrastructure challenges the city faces. We've had presentations from city officials. A subcommittee has met with department heads on their needs. We're more than familiar with the laundry list, and also very familiar with the financing constraints on how you get from point A to point B when you only have enough to get 1/10 of that done in any given year. So not only is the financing constraint hard to figure out how to incorporate into this process, because that's sort of the reality check. The probably more important piece of it that I really had a hard time trying to look at all of these tools is how do you make these decisions about these very expensive competing projects? And there is no process now that is in place that's formalized, that's something that people can point to that says, that's our capital plan, that's our 5-year capital plan, that's where how we're gonna finance it. That we don't have the how. And what I didn't see in any of the tools was, how do you make that a goal? Because the how consists of multiple components. It's an IT component of developing and implementing capital asset management program. there's a formal structure component of who's the decision makers and how does the administration collect data on these things, and how do then the department heads manage their input, how does the community, all of that is a how thing in my mind.
Okay.
Not the what we want to accomplish, which we pretty much know about.
Right.
So if you have any insight, suggestions on how you can actually incorporate process change into this, so it becomes a priority,
Yeah.
not
So
something that's a footnote.
right. No, I hear what you're saying. So in phase 3, the plan will start to look at how to do these, how do you reach your vision? We're not going to give you a capital improvement plan. But
We don't want that.
yeah,
We
but what
want
we,
the administration to say, over the next 10 years, we're gonna be working by this set of policies, procedures, guidelines, using these tools to manage this laundry
Right.
list. of
and
stuff.
so what I suspect will happen through the visioning process, I don't want to predetermine your results, but I suspect that public facilities and infrastructure will become a priority, one of the themes that the community tags as an issue that they want to tackle and focus on. And so what that means is there'll be a chapter. There might be 4 or 5 of these themes that the community says these are the most important things we want to really focus on to get to our vision. And then in phase 3, when we start to think about how, if that's the case, and I'm right, that public facilities and infrastructure comes out as one of the top 5 important themes for Gloucester to focus on in the next 10 years rather, then we would have a series of engagement opportunities to look at priorities and how to accomplish that. What are the gaps that we have right now? Do we know our needs? Do we know the gaps in terms of financing, like you said? And we would hold first these technical working sessions, which we hope the whole committee actually would attend, and really start to weigh in on, well, we feel like these are the next steps, and over the next 10 years, this is the kind of commitment we need. That's where you get that sort of specific language into the plan, is in that phase 3 around how you're going to do it. And through phase 3, we start to really vet. So we start with a big list that we come up with. We first ask community members like you to start to feed us in, like, what are the gaps here? What do we need to do? And then we get the consultant team together and start talking about best practices. We put together a whole list of strategy ideas for you to think about. And then we go through this vetting process where people start to prioritize. And what we find is when there are infrastructure, utility, public facility, when that is apparent that those are needs and there are gaps there, we start to see that community members prioritize those as being the top priority for the next 10 years. And what we would want, your help with is making sure that that first list we start out with in phase 3, the long list, before we start to prioritize, is inclusive of everything you were thinking about. Knowing that it can't all be accomplished, we want to make sure that it's really inclusive of everything on that wish list, including your capital plan. Now, let me just throw a question back at you. So you're recognizing that you're doing this work now, and you know your wish list, and you need to have a capital plan. What is the rough timeline of that? Are you using a consultant firm? Are you doing that in-house? Do you have a plan to create that capital plan now?
Well, again, we're not creating the plan per se.
Okay.
We are creating the process change that will produce the plan. And
I
there's a
Okay.
not too subtle distinction there, in that we don't have in place an institutionalized, formalized process for laying out the 5 or 10-year plan that the ordinance would have us
Yeah.
review. And so the mayor's asked us to come back with what are the elements of
Yeah.
process and the tools that you need to
Okay.
be successful.
I
So,
understand.
and it's the how, it's not the what.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. When I think about how, I think about, your priorities and what comes first, second, third, and where the funding's coming from. But you're talking about an internal process. I would think that that's less likely for the community to really have informed decisions about how
Which
you
is the problem,
doing.
which is why we've kicked these cans down the road for 30 years.
Right,
The fire station's approaching 100 years old. The
right.
public
I guess what
facility-
I guess what I'm saying is that it sounds to me like the mayor has authorized you to come up with that, working with department managers and the mayor. And I would think that that would be in your leadership kind of realm to come up with that, the how you're going to do it. I don't think the comp plan is going to get to that level of process for you. I think things that
understanding-
then, go ahead.
My understanding of the comprehensive plan is being much more toward the what that'll populate it, right? This almost,
Right,
I think this will kind of be the kickstart, because we'll have this concerted effort to get the what. And the secondary portion of this how do we, it's almost like would be how do we from here, right? Because they're gonna do all this work, get all this inputs, this all put together, basically, well, they said it's not gonna be a capital improvement plan, but it's gonna be something that very readily can become a capital improvement plan. I think that almost buys us the time to make sure that we are spinning up in the background, so that once, Jen and her team go away and leave us with this, that doesn't get put on a shelf and left with all the other really cool plans we have on that shelf. Instead of, okay, now that we've kind of kick-started this, put a lot of effort into getting this ball rolling, the ball is rolling, the CAB and these new processes we've come with maintain it. So I think what Jen's saying is that we're gonna get a lot of good information about community priority, and that, the laundry list we think we have and the laundry list that we may not even know about, but we'll still be working separately to be coming up to speed, or getting processes in place to kind of tag in after the consultants.
I would agree with you, except for this. This is not the first time the CIAB has been tasked with trying to come up with the recommendations on capital improvements. You were on the last, 10 years ago, that basically critiqued the administration for not having in place a way of getting these things prioritized, funded, and moved on. And I feel like we're at the same place decade later, until we can actually raise the profile of why do we keep failing at a rational process.
But I think,
moves-
but
Many are missing this.
so what Jen's team is working on, so for the difference here, is that, for example, in 2011 or whatever it was, we put the last report out. The report in part said, we don't know what we're doing at the time with Fuller School. We don't know what we're doing with West Parish. We don't know what we're doing with the Magnolia Fire Station, which was closed at the time, right? We need you to tell us what we're doing with those before we can tell you whether it's a good idea or not, and which order they should be done in, right? It sounds much more likely that after Jen's team is complete, there's going to be a plan that, using those old ones that are obsolete, are gonna say, we're gonna do this with Fuller School, we're gonna do this with the Magnolia Fire Station, we're gonna do this with West Parish. And that enables us to have that baseline of like, okay, well, we can actually do our job and provide, citizen input on this plan that was generated with citizen input to begin with. But none of that is going to impact the ability to sustain this. So I don't think what Jen and her team are providing us is going to provide us the sustainability portion of it. It's just going to kind of kickstart us and get us the actual, here are the things we are planning to do, which we didn't even have that. And right now don't have that. We don't have the plan. So for example, the fire station, this plan that they come up with may identify, a plan for central fire, a plan for modernizing the fire department, or the priority is fire department, modernization or that sort of thing, right? And so then at least we're not in the dark, we're not in the, should we do something with the fire station, what might that be? There may be something in this comprehensive plan that says, okay, over the next 10 years, we are going to reduce central fire to a satellite station and have a comprehensive headquarters, elsewhere, right? Boom. Now we have that, which is more than we have right now. And it's not an emergency. It's not, oh my goodness, the fire station fell over.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? Which is where we're heading right now. So we'll still be in a better position to do our job of analyzing and providing feedback on the decisions that have been made or are being made. But still, the process, the answer you're looking for, I think, comes from Jen's group. I think the kickstart of thinking about long-term addressing problems before they become emergencies comes from Jen's group. But our process to make sure that going forward when Jen's group leaves is still on us and department staff, et cetera, to make sure that, you know, we don't lose the momentum they're building.
I think
I,
that's,
I would like to say I agree. I can put that list together and you can put that list together. We could call it what is the outstanding capital needs of the city. And we won't be any farther along in identifying how any of that stuff's gonna get done, financed, prioritized, because we don't have the underlying process in place for making those kinds of decisions. So we can put the wish list together of, yeah, this fire department, central fire administration, whatever that project is, plus the remaining school, plus, yeah. And we know what those things are. But we don't have anything in place that the administration runs, that department heads run, that actually look at data, look at how you prioritize projects, how you ensure that stuff's maintained. There's something that's very process oriented here. That's how, for my mind, how you get to those high level wish lists of, yeah, we want to have a new fire station within 10 years because we need it.
Well, Jen, does the plan have financing, like, you know, benchmarks or guidelines or plans in that?
yeah, so when we get to phase 4, we come up with an implementation plan and we identify the sequencing of strategies, so short-term, medium-term, long-term over the 10 years. And then we identify potential funding sources that, of course, if they're outside of Gloucester, you'll need to be awarded. So of course we can't guarantee it, but the other thing, I'm listening to you and it seems to me that there could be a few other ways we could help. If there's a structural issue that comes out of this process, for example, and I don't want to predetermine what the issues are, but for example, the fact that I think it's the mayor and the city council have 2-year terms and every 2 years they all are up for re-election. Is that right?
Yep.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that feeds into the lack of, accountability or commitment. I don't want to use too strong of words regarding follow through, but something like that, if that becomes an issue, the structure of your government could potentially we could come out with some recommendations there. The second thing is, if there's a capacity issue, I see that you're being staffed here by David. I don't know to what level you have enough capacity to get to the next level of what you're trying to get to. So we do identify capacity gaps. And then the third thing is, I'm listening to you, is just pointing you in the direction of some communities we've worked with in various degrees that seem to have a very effective outcome for capital improvements. And you may be able to look at them as case studies, looking at the town of Brookline. Now, these are different forms of government, but still, the town of Brookline and the town of Medway are two in particular that I'm familiar with, that we've worked with before, not on this issue, but I just know from those communities that they're extremely organized around their capital improvement needs. And it could be that part of your committee's charge is to start, maybe you've done this already, but to start to investigate, well, what is the process that they use? And is there a way we could transfer that? So things like that, if process is coming out as an issue, and it could be for other things too. I don't know the results yet because we're still in the beginning stages of collecting input. But if those types of things come out, we could help you look at some best practices. But I think, and I'm sorry, I don't know everyone's name, but the fellow on the left here with
Sure.
I think you're right in terms of what we're able to give you and where we would fall short of what you're looking for. So some of this would be on you to, kind of figure out where is our process falling short. But if there are issues, like I mentioned, those could be integrated into our plans, saying, it could be controversial, but we could say something like, your 2-year terms are an issue for follow through and commitment. And I don't know if that's true, but that's something that, or looking at this case study in Brookline, here's how Brookline ensures that capital, improvements are prioritized and incorporated into a plan. And here's how department managers are accountable to that. We could do that if that's an issue that comes out. Does that sound like a little more helpful answer than we started out as?
It's a step in the right direction. We have talked about looking at peer communities and how they manage this. It's not made a lot of progress, but we're still interested in how they are able to produce plans that actually look not only good on paper, but seem to actually get the job done.
Yeah.
So
And you may, I don't know what kind of funding you have regarding this idea, but you may benefit from bringing a consultant in who writes these kinds of capital plans. Maybe you are already thinking of that, but they could do those case studies for you and give you recommendations that are very specific to Gloucester. That would go beyond what we're able to do, but there are consultants out there that could help. So that's the kind of thing, like, we look at capacity. When I say capacity, I don't necessarily mean you need a new employee in the city. You might just need an expert to come in and give you some kind of a process audit on why things are falling through the cracks.
we had a little bit of that from Division of Local Services at the state level.
Okay.
DOR has a bunch of people who came in and gave us sort of a primer on what are the elements of a normative capital improvement program. So we've sort of got that template.
Okay.
In our toolbox. I don't know that we need to hire someone to actually develop that. We just need to hunker down, I think, and figure out, can we get from A to Z? And how will we tailor it to what this looks like locally? It would be helpful if someone came along and said, oh, here's the plan, why don't you send this along to the mayor? But I don't think that's gonna happen realistically.
Yeah. Well, I think if you work in parallel on getting to the next level, then by the time we do the technical working sessions in phase 3, which will be later in the spring and the summer, I don't have the full schedule in front of me, but around that time, it would be really helpful if your full committee, and we can work out the open meeting law and advertising and whatnot, but your full committee coming to the technical working session on the core theme that's applicable. I think that kind of discussion, even if you each led a table, we typically break out the larger group into small groups and have a facilitator at each table. If it's a public facilities and services focused core theme, I could even see each of you leading a table and talking through, what you're working on in the process and what you're hoping to get out of the comp plan.
So and I think that would actually be, probably at phase 3 and 4, a place where we would, having gathered our thoughts, maybe make some preliminary recommendations, could offer those into the process. But one of the things that was sort of struck me is like, I couldn't find any place where IT as sort of fundamental need for every governmental entity. How does that get sort of addressed in these? Because it's all runs in the background, yet it's.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And what we've found in this came up in Medway as well. We integrated that into the public facilities and services component. It came out of the, working with department managers. Not so much in the public eye, that wasn't an issue, but when we hold department managers working sessions as part of phase 3 about helping us figure out, well, if these are the community's priorities, what are the gaps to getting them there or getting the community there? And IT came out of that process and then was integrated into the recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, any other thoughts for me?
I have the general question. How are we doing with meetings in a box and the kind of response?
Good. I just pulled that up from the meeting last week. I don't have this week's calculation yet. We typically do it at the end of the week, but I have, as of last week, we had 1,279 participation points across the 4 tools. So we had 1,011 survey respondents, 120 tabling attendees, 43 meeting in a box participants and 105 ideas on the crowd map. And so that was about 43% of the project engagement goal.
Also too, Joel, we started doing some this week, actually Monday and Tuesday, one in West Parish, one at Plum Cove. We had some attendees. One thing we are finding is the folks that are taking them are filling them out, but they're slow in getting them back. So we keep pinging them to say, please scan your copy or drop it off at the annex or drop it off at City Hall, whatever you do, just get it back to us. So I expect that number to go up.
And my last question, this stems from kind of what I was seeing at the
Planning board is that my fear is, is how to, I don't know if it's adjust for or how to account for the kind of silent majority that, is just running in 19 different directions and doesn't, like the example I think of, Jen, we had the planning board worked for 4 years. They paid a consultant. They interviewed local permitting attorneys, myself included, and they came forward with like 10, big changes proposed for the local zoning ordinance. And went through the planning board, unanimously approved, went to city council. I think it got approved at the subcommittee level. Then an election happened, new people got on the council, and 4.5 years, like of the 10, like 2 passed and 8. And what happened was there were, under 100, but in the dozens of people came to speak in opposition, and the lower, a couple dozen speaking in favor. And what I kind of, my post, my post incident analysis myself was that typically at city council, they're hearing, about Project X, and Project X maybe only has, 30 neighbors. And if, 20 of those neighbors come out and have a problem with it, that's a huge number of people being affected saying it's a bad thing. But Gloucester's 30,000 people. And if only, 70 were upset enough to come out and talk about these, that's statistically insignificant. And that there was so much, and so what I'm trying to get to is that, I'm afraid that in the same way those 70 or so came out and were very loud about these things that impacted 30,000 people and are going to impact them for decades, this even more so is going to impact 30,000 people, hundreds of millions of dollars in spending, and have, immediately a decade consequence, but likely whatever happens this decade then tees up what happens or does not happen in decades after that. And how do we account for, I'm glad to hear 1,000 people have participated so far, right? That's way better than usual. How do we account for the fact there are, probably going to be 15,000 people who,
Don't have the time.
would more appreciate that their representatives do what is right and not do what is loudest, not what is being championed the loudest.
Yeah, I
There's a
could
lot
go on forever about this question. So we have a real systemic issue, especially in New England, with the way our land use decisions are made. They've become very political. And when the loud voices come out at a city council meeting or a planning board meeting or a zoning board meeting, it seems overwhelming. And in order to get reelected, you feel like, oh gosh, I have to seem as though I'm going to be listening and swayed by these arguments, even though we had a really strong engagement, that represented over 10% of your, I would challenge you to find any other plan at the end of this that will reach more people as a percentage of your population. You're never going to reach 100%. People aren't interested. They don't have time. They don't feel it will make a change, etc. So there's all sorts of strategies when you get down to trying to get things adopted that you can think about, and they're all political strategies, and they have to do with getting advocates in force out at these meetings as well. There are, communities that have kind of nurtured advocacy groups around certain issues that are hot topic issues that have had some success. But when you get down to it, you're not going to get 100% of your population to weigh in. So it's just not realistic to think you will. So what we can do is do the best to fill the representation gaps. So we're looking at, the folks that always participate have already participated, but it's the folks that are harder to reach that we're encouraging focus on now. And so Alana last week presented the largest representation gaps so that you can say at the end of this, you've heard from youth and young adults, BIPOC and Hispanic residents, lower income residents, renters, and single person households. It's always tricky to get them in the exact numbers that you see in the population, but we try to do as good a job as we can to get it better than it would have been if we didn't focus on it. So that's as good as it's going to get. And if your political leaders are turning over every 2 years, it's also going to be pretty tough to get people to kind of stick by a plan that was done by perhaps other people. That's always a little tricky too.
Yep.
Excuse me for a moment, is Stephen. I had allocated 5 to 6, and I have another commitment, so I'm afraid I'm gonna have to step off.
Oh, we're gonna lose our quorum then. Anything important?
Well, what time was this meeting due to end?
It was an hour. We got started, but do you have any questions, Steve? Do you want to throw out there?
No, I think, thank you. Jen did a nice job of laying it out, and I've gotten something from the discussion, and David has, sorry, Paul, I always defer to you, because I think you've been approaching this in as good a way as can be done, given what we have to work with. And I'm, as long as we're willing to just sort of give up some of the field sites, and that's fine with me. And we work toward just trying to get something out for the administration to look at and knock around would be great. I mean, I think, Jen, there's you're at a very high level, I think, obviously, and we are way down in the weeds and trying to see how we fit in all of this, and so it's been useful, enlightening, to understand the overall process. How many phases? What's the final phase?
The fourth phase is when we're looking at implementation, funding, sequencing the priorities, and who's responsible, including department managers or departments, and then boards and committees.
And when would that be from now? When would phase 4?
I don't have the full schedule, but our process is about 18 months or so. I think
18
we've had
months.
a little bit of extension with some more time for engagement. So maybe
Okay.
we're at like 19 or 20 months at this point from the
Well, that
start.
helps us, Paul. I mean, I think for us to think about what we should be doing in our stop date or finish date of anything we're doing and presenting it to the administration.
Does this actually become a proposal that the administration submits to the city council for its consideration, or they're just considered to be parties to the process and it?
Yeah,
is
it
formal
depends.
ratification, I guess? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it depends. So the statute in Massachusetts is just the planning board needs to approve the plan, but
Okay.
some communities choose to also bring it forward to the city council to have additional approval there, even though it's not required by the statute.
Symbolic.
Yeah, okay.
All right, well, I'm gonna move to adjourn so Steve can get out of here.
A second motion, I'm just gonna make a quick announcement. We will be trying to set up a meeting in January. It will be preceded by an information packet from the administration. And we will be looking at not only the current list of projects, but we'll also be asked to weigh in on one or two of them as we start to figure out what should these recommendations look like. I will try to come up with a grid so that at least there's a rational way we can approach this, and not going to pretend that it's the only way, just it's a way to start the conversation for ourselves. And the other thing that Jill asked is that we start to think about getting some board members in. If there's somebody that you think is got an interest in this, especially in the capital finance realm,
Sure.
that would be helpful for the mayor's appointments.
Are we at liberty, Paul? Excuse me, to expand the group?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's nothing that's limits us to 7 members, I don't believe.
Okay.
I think,
Do we have 7, actually?
no, well, we don't, because we've never had, Jason's never attended.
Jen's still on, so Jen, thank you, by the way. I just wanna.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
Okay.
Thanks,
All
Jen.
right. Take care.
Thank you.
So just one quick, I lived in Rosendale for 25 years, so and I never saw you once. So I just want to know what's up with that.
That's so funny. Maybe we did see each other and we didn't
Oh,
realize.
okay.
Yeah,
I
I've
moved
lived here
5 years
since,
ago, so,
oh, okay, I've lived here since 2000. We moved here.
okay. That was a
All right. Good to
Good
meet you
night.
all.
Nice
Take care.
meeting
Bye,
you.
Jen. All right, so I moved, you seconded it.
All in favor? So adjourned.
All right.
So, oh,
So,
do
so
you,
it's,
do you have one more second? It doesn't need
Yeah.
to be.
I don't know how to get us out of, back into,
Well, we're still recorded, just heads up on that.
That's fine. Yeah, yeah. I'm used to it. My whole life, Joel, is recorded. Um, just a quick heads up. So you should have before that next January meeting when we do get it scheduled as well. I'm going to reach out to the department heads probably 2 weeks before to get me just a bulleted list of things that they know that are out there in the universe and send that to this group about a week before. I did have an early responder, Ryan Knowles, our excellent IT director, has offered to put forward his plans for what he was appropriated most recently. So we'll have that. It'll be something that, the funding was already in place for. However, this group hasn't seen like, what is he going to do with that? So I'll get that to you all.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye, Steve.
Steve left.